Hello, Practical Magic family. It's me, Vanessa, the Queen of Magic, with Vinh Giang here today, and we are on episode 29 of the Practical Magic Show. I can hardly believe it. For those of you just tuning in, the Practical Magic Show is what I like to call the Penn and Teller of business, where I interview really magical people, people who seem to create unbelievable lives that to the rest of us looks like magic, and then we peel back the curtain and we reveal the trick. And so, really, we couldn't have a more perfect guest for today's episode, which is actually about how success itself does not create magic automatically. Perhaps one of the most insidious and pervasive things we keep believing. And Vin, you are just the perfect person to be here for this because when I look at you from the outside, when I met you before I met you, your life looks incredible. It's truly a dream. It looks like a dream. You are one of the most inspiring speakers I've ever heard. You're magical in your communication and your presentation. You're humble in your stories. You're brilliant in your wisdom. You pull it all together and you're this grounded, fun human being that's actually a joy to spend time with. And so thank you for being here to talk about what I think is a really meaningful and grounding conversation to have in the Practical Magic Show.
Wow, I've never had an introduction that was so epic. That you make. Thank you. That I need to bring you with me everywhere. You need to be my hype girl. Out there just hyping me. That was fantastic. Thank you.
I'm a yes to that. All in. Give me my start.
Oh yeah, that was amazing. Oh no, it was poetic. It was you're gonna have to deal with a very arrogant Vin now after that kind of introduction. I'm gonna just be a monster now.
Change the episode title.
Hey, but I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking today about this idea, and we've talked a little bit about this, and I've talked about it kind of in the periphery of the show, but I'm so excited to explore this sort of what I call like the lie we keep falling for. That if I just somehow can create success a lot more quickly, then everything will be great because then my life will be amazing. But you did not have that experience.
Well, first tell me, how do you define magic? How do you define it? When you say magic, what does that mean to you? Just so I have a bit of context on this very word magic to you.
I love it. It means a couple different things. So one definition that I love is operating outside of logic. So that's one. The second is sort of piggybacking off of that. People who, these words just came to me, I've never used, but are able to seamlessly blend practical work and joy to create almost exponential results. So you create incredible things, but through this combination of practical work and joy. And then I think the third that's evolving more is that there is the only word I can use is magical. There's a magical way in which these people create, so it's not you're sitting down, that X work will create Y outcome. And there's just a little bit more playfulness in the way you show up in the world, and that the way of showing up has different things, I don't know, manifest in your life, but it's not random, which is the worst of the three. So pick the one that you want.
No, that's brilliant. I just wanted to get your kind of point of view on what you felt magic was for you. That's beautiful, beautiful meaning. I love it. 3 parts. Well, I can tell you that for me, the word magic as a magician is the unknown. I mean, the only way magic can exist is if you don't know how it's done. So if someone showed you a piece of magic and you know how it's done, it's no longer magical. So magic exists in the unknown. Astonishment exists in the unknown. So anytime we feel like we know what we're doing, it loses its magic. And then that's what kind of happened to me, in that I thought that once I had career success, once I had financial success, that was going to be magical. And just almost true to its definition, that the moment I thought I knew what it was, and it escaped me because it wasn't that. It was crazy. I remember at the peak of my career, which was in 2019, before the pandemic, I remember when that happened, I found myself in such an unhappy place where, as a speaker, as a professional speaker, when you hit 80 or 90 events a year, that's kind of, that's kind of really peak career kind of a number to be able to hit. And I just wasn't happy.
Mm.
But I was so sure that that's where happiness lived. That's, all the success that came for that, being able to work with all these different companies. I thought surely that's where it lives. And when I opened the door, it didn't live there. I found myself more unhappy than ever. And it was one of the first times I ever had a panic attack in my life. I
Wow.
still remember waking up this morning, this one morning in 2019, towards the end of the year, and just found it hard to breathe. And it was so weird. And I just felt like I didn't want to do this anymore. And it was just so, I don't know, it just freaked me out that, how could I have been this lost when this was where the light was pointing? This was where the North Star seemed to be. This is where the pot at the end of the rainbow, everyone told me that's where you'd find it. And it wasn't there. And it just freaked me out. And it was, very unmagical.
I mean, I'm so grateful to you for sharing that because I mean, it is the perfect representation of like, you got it all and where is it?
Mm.
So what do you see looking back? Like how were you so lost for so long?
Because I'd been acting on values of mine that I developed when I was in my early 20s. In my early 20s, because I didn't succeed in school, around my friends, I was the university dropout. I wasn't doing very well financially, wasn't doing very well academically, wasn't doing very well career-wise. So I had a lot of self-doubt and didn't have very high levels of self-esteem. So my goals when I was in my early 20s was purely financial and wealth creation driven, career driven. So I'd set certain goals when I was in my early 20s. I didn't revisit anything in my mid 20s or my late 20s. I just stuck to the goals in my early 20s. So
Mm,
for a good 10 years, I didn't adjust anything. I just focused purely on financial reward and career growth. That was it. So where I went wrong was I didn't recalibrate as I got older.
mm,
Because again, our values and our goals, it shifts in life, but I didn't adjust for that. The analogy I often use is a satellite. It kind of moves its position every single second. It's like, oh, I'm slightly off course at this point, so I've got to move 2 degrees to the left. Oh, again, I'm slightly off course, zero point
mm,
0.5 degrees to the right. So it's consistently readjusting and recalibrating on its journey, whereas I didn't recalibrate at all.
hmm.
I'd kind of gone 10 years just sticking to the very goals that I had in my early 20s, but I'd become a very different person by my late 20s, but I
Mhm.
didn't recalibrate for that.
And why
So
not
as
do
yeah.
you why not do you think? Like I have my own suspicions for why I didn't, but I'm curious what you see, like, why not?
Well, because at that time, all the influencers that I was following at the time were just all saying, work harder, work harder, work harder. And I was feeding my mind with that. So and again, I wasn't conscious. I didn't think about,
Mhm,
oh, I
mhm,
need to stop. I need to pause. I need to recalibrate.
mhm.
No one really pushes that. No one that I was following anyway.
Yeah,
It was kind of the more, 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 more culture. So
yep.
it just wasn't even on my radar. I
And I
didn't
can
even think to
imagine
do this.
too that having the levels of success you were having, it would almost, like, give you a hit that would make you think, "Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, I got a little closer," and then it
Yeah.
disappears and you're, "Oh, wait a second, what happened? I guess I gotta get more because it went away."
That's exactly right. And I had so many other values in my life, and I look at them as buckets. And the only bucket that I was filling was the career bucket and maybe the financial bucket. But then I had so many other buckets, so many other values in my life that have completely gone dry.
Mhm.
And that's what caused so much pain and suffering, was because I didn't care to them. I didn't look after them.
I think that's a really useful. I've never heard it framed that way before. I've thought about it in terms of kind of making up for like I call it a trauma mirage, where you think you're chasing a vision, but it's actually what I
Mhm.
call a trauma mirage, which is it's just your trauma projected in a positive It's the opposite of your trauma projected up here. And it looks like a vision, and you chase it and you chase it, but you never get closer. The same way in the desert, you walk and never reach the oasis.
Mm.
But I've never heard it talked about it in terms of recalibrating to new values, right? That you were operating off of values from when you were younger. And that's a really important, I think that's easily accessible. I think that's why I like that so much, because we're not always
Yeah.
able to step back and look at my limiting beliefs and like all that language. But I think people can really relate to the idea of values. And it's so it's, looking back, it's so obvious that your values in your 20s would be different than the values in your late 20s and early 30s. But I can see how there's be so much momentum behind the younger values that you wouldn't stop and fill the other buckets.
And you're exactly right. I mean, our values change throughout life. We change as people throughout life, and we've got to adjust our actions based on the new values that we've adopted, or maybe some of the old values that we've brought along with us. They're still there. And I just realized that I was just completely out of alignment. And I think the key word is alignment, because I was just living out of alignment with my values. I valued family. I kept saying I valued family, but the more events that I got, the more I was away from my family. There was a point I was away in 2019. I was away from my 2-year-old baby boy and my wife, who I love so dearly, but I was away from them 180, 200 days a year because I was away filling the wealth bucket, the career bucket. And, when you live in a way that's not aligned with your values for long enough, you'll become terribly unhappy. And there's nothing magical about just serving the two values when you actually have 5 core values.
Yeah.
So it's so important to live in alignment, I think. And the more and more I grow, the more and more I realize the importance of alignment.
I want to talk more about alignment, but before we do, I'm going to write it down because I don't want to forget. Can we go back to the moment where you really realized that and you had that panic attack, and what happened in the immediate, short, and long term after that? What? Because and let me give you a little more background on my question.
Yeah.
When I've heard these stories, and I'm not saying yours, but these stories in the past, I feel like that part right after gets skipped too much. It's like, oh, and then boom, it changed. And I don't want to miss that, because those really hard moments, I think, are where some of the ensuing magic are created.
Yeah. Look, I couldn't get out of it. I'm usually a fairly upbeat person. Hopefully you can tell, but I for nearly 2+ weeks, every morning I woke up, I just didn't feel any joy. And I remember my wife, she was so concerned about me, and I was freaking out myself, because I think this was the first time in my life I actually felt really depressed. And the more depressed I felt, the more confused I became, because I went, wait, people would die to have what I have right now. What the hell is wrong with me? Am I not grateful? And I just kept going down this spiral further and further and further. And I remember the only point that helped me was when I realized that I needed help, that I couldn't get myself out of this rut, that even my wife couldn't get me out of this rut. And it was very difficult for my wife to accept that she couldn't help me at that point. So I reached out to one of my really dear friends, Ali, and he was out of Melbourne, Australia at the time. I was in Southern California, and I reached out to him for help. I said, "Hey man, I think I'm in trouble. I think I need help." He put aside 2 weeks, flew over to the US, and spent 2 weeks with me.
Wow.
A friend of mine, who's the CEO of the second largest golf community in the world, just left everything and said, "I got you. I'll come help you." And he spent 2 weeks with me, and that was, I mean, gosh, to have friends like this, I feel so grateful for in my life. But he sat down with me and said, "Okay, look, we got this. First of all, because you were able to cram for an exam that you didn't study for the entire 20 weeks, and you crammed for it in 2 nights and you passed it. You're capable. We'll work this out." So we sat there for 2 weeks and we mapped out my entire value system. And never before have I done this in my life. And he sat me down and he goes, no, that's a BS value, Vin. That's absolute bullshit. You say that's a value, but show me the actions that have proven that this is actually something you value.
Oh,
So
what
we
a
sat there, we debated day in, day out. And, you know, in the end, after a week of this, he goes, no, we can't just do this here. We need to get out of this environment. So we both flew to New York and spent a week in New York, a new environment, fresh way to look at old problems, get distance from where you currently are. And we just mapped out this life design document. And that's what we called it. And it had all of my values tested. And for once, I was able to look at this doc and go, wow, that's me. This is who I am. And that saved me, saved my happiness. And it took so much work. I couldn't believe how intensive that process was. The number of bloody walks we went on for hours on end. But that's what it takes. If you really want to know who you are, you really want to know what your true values are, don't try to do it by yourself. I think the key thing there is reach out for help, reach out to someone that can help you. And for me, it was one of my best friends, Ali. And being so clear on that after, Vanessa, I was able to live a life that's more aligned with the values that I have. Before that, didn't even know what they were. Had a vague idea, but didn't really know what they are with clarity. And I think that's the core problem, is that when we live without clarity, we suffer unnecessarily.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I didn't intend for it to come out so eloquently. So
Yeah, that's just your poetic genius.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's
when we live.
I think a lot of times people say that, oh, I lack motivation, I lack inspiration. I think a lot of the times the reason why that happens is because we lack clarity. We're unhappy. Why? Because you don't know what you want and you don't know what you're working towards. So I think clarity is that first step.
I could not agree more. And I love you for the timing of this. Like, for myself, I think also
Really?
so many people right now, you know, to me, COVID was a catalyst. It just catalyzed evolutions that were already taking place, but it just turned the heat up. If I had more chemistry knowledge, I could throw in some really bomb metaphors, but I don't. I
don't have that either.
I had to beg my teacher for a C. Hardest working, worst capable chemistry student in history of time. But anyway, I think this is so timely because people have been trucking and trucking and trucking and trucking along. I think in that sort of disconnected place that you were talking about, being in your 20s, and all of a sudden, forgive me for, you know, this is not to minimize any of the really awful things that have come from COVID, but one of the blessings of this pandemic is that we rarely get gifted an opportunity to just reevaluate in a way that is essential, like what you can't not reevaluate. And so despite the fact that this was a 2-week process, are there any, can we ground this in some practical questions, or can you share some of the questions that you asked or ways that you looked at this so that people watching can at least take some of that and do it themselves?
Absolutely. I'll look through my notes here real quick, but I have a list of questions that I ask myself. And I found I had these list of questions that I've been gathering all through my life reading books. And I had questions that were based around the topic of letting go, questions that were based around being myself, questions around my dreams, my growth, love, and how I'm serving the world. So I'll give you I've got 5 questions in each. Do you think I should read all of them, or maybe one from each? What do you think?
Why don't you give us one from each? And if you're feeling incredibly generous and you want to snap a photo, we can share.
I'll snap a photo.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I'll snap a photo afterwards so people have these, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, I mean, on letting go, one of the questions there is, what do you spend too much time doing? So it just kind of gives me a frame of mind. What should I be letting go of? Being myself, I've got here, one of the questions is, what moves you to tears? So I've got a question there. And then my dreams, I've got here, you know, what were your childhood dreams? Trying to connect more with my inner child. My growth, I have, well, what challenges do you want to overcome? And for love, one of the questions I've got for myself is, what's one of the kindest things that someone has done for you? And serve, I have one of them is, what have you witnessed recently that has strengthened your faith in humanity? Right. So,
Wow.
and it's funny, I've got a bunch of these questions, and I asked myself all of these questions during that process just to give myself a nice little 360 view of me
Yep.
and where my current headspace is. And from doing this and talking to one of my best friends in my life, we started writing down key things. Well, what are your core 5 values? And I started just writing some down, and it wasn't 5 to begin with; it was like 15. But
Mhm.
then a lot of them weren't real values. A lot of them were values that society wanted me to have.
Mhm.
Because if I said that I value this, everyone else around would be like, "Yeah, you're a good person, Vin." But to me, I realized that I'm not here to please you. I'm not here to please anyone other than myself. This is life. We're here to live, and I have to be true to myself. I have to be courageous enough to be myself and not to be someone you want me to be. I have to have the courage to be me. So then you're able to strip away from those values. And then once you have your core set of about 5 values, then I got really specific, meaning, well, how are you going to live out these values? What actions are you going to be taking? What are the actions? No, literally, what are the actions you're going to take to live out these values? And I mapped them out in a ton of detail. And so to me, that was the beginning processes of going through this whole lifestyle design doc, is because from your values need to come a list of actions on how you're going to live out those values.
Mhm.
And I wrote them all down. One of my core ones is generosity. Well, okay, how are you going to live that out? Precisely. How are you going to live that out? And you start mapping it out. So to me, generosity to me is not just in money and time. Generosity to me is in energy.
Mhm.
I mean, right now, I hope you feel the generosity and energy, because I want to give you this energy. I don't want to give you, a half-assed version of Vin. I want to give you as much energy as I humanly can.
Mm.
Again, be specific. And that to me was in my communications daily with humans, with people. I will give you all of me. I won't hold back.
Hmm.
So again, I got really specific, and then I started to design what we call a lifestyle document. This is how I'm going to live. And every year I revisit this now.
Mm.
Been doing so for the last 3 years, and go, are these still my values? And if they are, am I living by them? It's like an audit.
This
Yeah.
is so there's so much. Thank you for making that so practical, because I can imagine. I'm thinking about my business manager, Sarah, and she is
Yeah.
so, I want to know exactly how to do that. So I can just see her, writing down these questions, and I'm excited to look at them, and thank you for sharing them.
Yeah,
That
that's okay.
that practicality is amazing.
And
And I think the other thing that is so magical about this, and is non so magical in the sense of the definition of beyond logic, outside of the norm, we don't do this. Because the
mm,
tendency, I think the impulse rather, when we're in a state where things fall apart, is to hurry up and scramble and put them back together as quickly as you can, and just keep climbing. And you didn't do that. You sat in the rubble.
yeah, I sat in the dark. I
Mhm.
sat in the dark for a while.
Mhm.
And, I have to, again, when you're talking about practicality, journaling is so critical. You look at athletes, you look at the top performers of the world, when they train in the gym, they write down every single repetition, they write down every single exercise, they write down every time they increase the weight or the length of the cardio session, so that when they look back to their performance, they can see the formula that led to that outcome.
Mm.
There's so many of us, we know what brings us joy. It's just that we forget what we
Mhm.
did to lead us to that feeling of joy.
Mhm.
And I've been journaling now for the last 3 years, because that's one of the things I got from that experience, was that I didn't know, my thoughts were so jumbled up, and there were so many thoughts running around in my head. I had no clarity because it was completely tangled.
Yeah.
A huge part of me got clarity from starting to write down my thoughts. So I
Mhm.
can tell you now that last month I had a bad day. I had a really bad day. And I can tell you exactly why that bad day happened,
Mm.
why I woke up anxious, why I woke up not feeling good. And I can see it with clarity now as a result of, instead of waking up going, oh man, I don't know why I feel crap. And
Mhm.
when you lack that clarity on that one day, it starts to bleed into the second day and the third day and the fourth day. It's like when you tangle up earphones. If you don't untangle it right away, you'll get more and more and more tangled. Then it becomes harder and harder and harder to untangle.
Yes.
So now I untangle every day. Every morning I wake up and I just kind of untangle myself.
Mm.
And it's clarity. I have so much clarity now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I love that. Thank you for going into that detail. And I'm really
Okay.
curious too, afterwards, so after you have this lifestyle document, tell me how you started to change things and what changed and what
Yeah.
was that next year like?
Accountability. So essentially, I jumped on a call with my best mate Ali, and we would jump on a call every single month. And he'd track. He'd go, okay, so you said that, Vin, one of your values was freedom. You valued freedom. So tell me, what have you done this month to work towards that value of yours? Again, you said to me one of your values was family. So what have you done this month to work towards that value of yours? So again, I've always used KPIs, key performance indicators, in my business, but I never used it for my life. And I never kind of looked at my life as it's something that needs to be managed, right? And I do it really well with my business, but I did it terribly with my life.
Wow.
So then in this document, literally, we have progress bars for everything. So I had literally a progress bar with my family. And this is not sitting down with my son, not being present with him. This was, okay, well, let's find a hobby together that we can do with the family. So the first month was we went out to REI and bought tents. And, I tried this new thing, camping, that was completely foreign to my wife and I. We fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And we started tracking all of these things. And all of a sudden, when I started tracking all of this, I ensured that all my buckets were being filled.
Mm.
But what this meant was, Vanessa, that I had to slightly reduce the amount of water that I poured into my career bucket. I had to reduce the amount of water that I poured into my wealth bucket, financial wealth, because you can't do everything. Time is limited. So as I took time away from the other buckets, I was able to fill up my other buckets that deeply needed nourishment.
Yeah.
So that then it became the hard decision of reducing the trajectory on the career path, reducing and it's funny because then COVID came along and took away that almost completely for a certain period, which was powerful, scary, but powerful.
I call that hot spiritual fire. Burns your ego up real quick.
Oh yeah.
And I think this is I think this is an important question, because when you're on the other side of the kind of knowing what you really saw, in other words, I know that I'm putting too much time into my career, and I know that my relationships are suffering, and I know that, but you don't know it like you knew it.
Well, I knew it because I was writing it.
No,
and I was looking into it.
I mean, in that moment where like you really kind of had that low moment where you realized like, okay, something is not right, something is not working. I feel like before you hit that moment, you might have a sense that that's true,
Oh, yeah.
not enough to really change it. And so if I'm saying, if you're in that spot where you kind of know it, but you're not quite ready to change it, and then I were to hear, well, I had to reduce the amount of water that was going into my wealth and my career bucket,
Yeah.
I might tiptoe back and be like, well, because I'm not really seeing it yet, right? So can you talk about why that was okay where before it might not have been, and what shifted in your career and what your life looks like now instead?
A lot of it comes down to the people you spend time with and also who you follow online. It's a big component of it, because even social media is it's a scary thing, because I used to follow quite a few entrepreneurs that had that value and mantra of, work your face off kind of thing, right? Work until you die. And I had to unfollow all of them.
Mhm.
I unfollowed all of them. And I started following people who were living a more wholehearted life, people who lived a more balanced life. And I totally appreciate that there are times in your life when you are going to be unbalanced, that you almost need to be unbalanced to be able to break through. But I don't want to live in that state. Not for me. That's not right for me. Some people might find it to be the best life for them, but it wasn't for me. So I had to unfollow a whole bunch of people. And then I also had to, quite literally in my life, had to stop spending so much time with some people.
Mhm.
I had to find the people who lived out the values that I wanted to live out. And it's why it's so true. It's that statement. It's why I say it a lot in my keynotes. You're the direct reflection of the top 5 people you spend time with.
Mm.
And what happens is we don't often change that top 5. And as a result of not changing the top 5, the danger in that is that you're no longer that same person, but you're trying to change, but you find it so difficult to change. And that's a lot of the times it's because you're staying in the same environment.
Yeah.
So I completely changed environment.
Mm.
You know, one of the big reasons I came back home to Australia, I used to live in the US, was because I knew that I needed to be around my parents, my family. I
Mhm.
needed to be around my best friends. You know, whereas in the US, I was alone. And the only thing I could turn to were other people who were absolutely career hungry. And they made me even more career hungry, even when I was completely stuffed.
Mhm.
So I had to make that radical change. It was hard, but it was the right decision for me and my family and for my happiness and for the magic to still exist in my life now. I had to learn how to say no.
Yep. And what do the career and wealth buckets look like now? I mean, are they still deeply satisfying? Have you reshifted the values?
It's so crazy, right? Because when you are walking down one path, that's the only path you know, and that's the only path you think is possible. So when I moved back to Australia with such crazy constraints, I mean, you can't travel in Australia. We couldn't travel anywhere. We couldn't even travel interstate. So then
Mhm.
again, my keynote speaking career was based on travel, based on live events occurring, right? So then I had to completely revamp my entire business. And so I built a whole virtual studio, experimented like crazy, been through 15 iterations now of improving the studio. And now I don't travel at all, but my business has more than doubled.
Hmm.
And I am, you know, I finished a presentation this morning. I've been up since 1 a.m. because I work with my clients from the US. But then once I finish, I walk in, I have breakfast with my family.
Mm.
Right? I dress my son ready for school. It's magic lives in the unknown. I didn't know that this was possible,
Mm.
but you have to leave room for the unknown. Because if you leave no room for the unknown, you leave no room for magic. I mean, imagine you knew everything that was going to happen in your life. You knew everything. It's like you read a story and you go, and that's my life. There's no room for magic there. I left the room for magic. I didn't know what was going to happen when I moved to Australia. No idea. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I'm not saying be irresponsible, but to me, I left room for that. And in that room, I discovered a completely different life. This morning, I served 800 people from all over the US, and I did it from my garage in my home in South Australia. It's amazing. And I think, again, it goes back to that when you do something one way and all you know is one path, then you think that's the only path that is possible.
Mhm. And I think that's where
Magic
alignment comes
exists
back
when
in.
you explore. Yeah, you're right with what you just said. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. We all love a happy ending. Whatever answer you gave would have been fine, but it's deeply satisfying that
Well, I,
you spent
I,
all the
I will say this as well, Vanessa, is that the journey of discovering the magic wasn't pleasant. Okay, it wasn't. This is so inspiring. No, it was grueling trying to
time.
work out how to build the studio. I wasted a lot of money. I disappointed a lot of clients. Lots, yeah.
I want to have an entire, I want to have an entire season of the show on failure, just
Yeah.
like the worst moments. Let's just juice it. So I appreciate you sharing that too. I understand that, and I appreciate you saying that because it's important to call out. Um, if you could, I'm going to totally put you on the spot here for our final
Okay.
question. If you had to do a one-word keynote on the conversation we just had, what would the word be?
Recalibrate.
It's amazing.
That's it. You are an evolving human. Don't forget to check in with yourself and recalibrate.
So good. So to those who are watching, who are undoubtedly falling in love and want to learn more from you and work with you and know you, I know you have a new course out. I'd love for you to talk about that, and anywhere else you'd love people to experience more of you.
Yeah, look, just follow me on social media. I think I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. My handle is AskVin, AskVINH. And I've also put out like a free masterclass. If you go to my social media, you'll find it. It's my free masterclass where you can learn the foundations to great communication. I mean, that's what I teach. I teach public speaking and presentation skills, storytelling. So check that out, and you'll get a sense for my content. And if you want to join me further, I'd welcome that.
And join you further through the Stage Academy.
Yes. So I used to run this as a live class, but again, the time zones in the world are just so crazy. So I created an on-demand version of my 3-day experience, which is called the Stage Academy, if you want to join that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Vin. This was far beyond expectation, and I'm really grateful.
Oh, thanks for having me, Vanessa, and thanks everyone for listening.
Bye.